The encounter. The new school year dawned crisp and bright, with leaves beginning to turn, and the air buzzing with the excitement of fresh starts. Even Caldwell, a reserved junior with a love for books and quiet mornings, found himself walking into his first-period history class, a room filled with familiar faces. He'd spent most of his summer tucked away in his mother's bookstore, assisting customers and losing himself in the pages of ancient myths and mysteries. In a way, he liked blending into the background, observing rather than participating. But this morning, Evan's usually calm demeanor was unsettled, though he couldn't pinpoint why. He stepped into his classroom, the hum of voices rising and falling as friends reunited after the break, exchanging stories of summer travels and accomplishments. Mrs. Lang, the history teacher, stood at the front, her gentle smile beaming as she waited for the last few stragglers to find their seats. "All right, everyone, settle down." Mrs. Lang's voice sliced through the chatter, instantly silencing the room. "Before we dive into our first-day introductions, I want to introduce a new student joining us this year." The teacher's words were met with curiosity, heads turning toward the front of the class. Even watched as a boy with an easy, confident smile stepped up next to Mrs. Lang. He had sandy brown hair and stood tall, his posture casual yet self-assured. Even felt a jolt of familiarity, though he knew he had never met this boy before. "Everyone, this is Aaron Parker. His family just moved here from Seattle, and he's joining us this year. Let's all make him feel welcome," Mrs. Lang said, stepping aside. Aaron nodded toward the class, a grin crossing his face. "Hey, everyone," he said, voice warm and steady. "Looking forward to getting to know you all." The room fell unusually silent as students exchanged glances, some nudging each other with wide-eyed looks. As Aaron's eyes scanned the room, they landed on Evan, and for a split second, his grin faded, replaced by a look of surprise. Their eyes locked, and an odd feeling washed over Evan, as if he were looking into a mirror. Their features were startlingly similar. Same height, same sandy brown hair, and even the same sharp jawline. The only difference was in the details. Evan's eyes were a deep brown, while Aaron's were a piercing green. "What's going on?" whispered a girl from the back row. "They look like twins." The whisper spread like wildfire, with students turning to stare at the two boys, eyebrows raised and mouths open in disbelief. Evan felt his cheeks flush under the scrutiny, but he couldn't tear his gaze away from Aaron, who seemed equally bewildered. Mrs. Lang cleared her throat, sensing the tension. "Aaron, you can take the empty seat by the window," she said, gesturing toward the desk next to Evan. With an almost dazed expression, Aaron nodded and made his way over, sliding into the seat. He glanced sideways at Evan, who felt his own heart pounding. The class finally began, and Mrs. Lang started talking about the year's curriculum, but Evan struggled to focus. He was keenly aware of Aaron's presence beside him, a strange, magnetic pull he couldn't explain. After what felt like an eternity, the bell rang, signaling the end of class. Evan gathered his books slowly, hoping to get a chance to speak with Aaron without the whole class hovering around. He managed to catch Aaron's eye just as he rose from his seat. "Hey," Evan said, hesitating. "That was weird, right? I mean, us." Aaron let out a chuckle, though it was more nervous than amused. "Yeah, it was. I thought I was seeing things for a second. It's like we could be brothers or something." Evan laughed softly, though his heart skipped a beat at the thought. "Maybe we're just some sort of cosmic coincidence," he joked, but he couldn't shake the feeling that it was more than that. They walked out of the classroom together, merging into the flow of students in the hall. As they navigated through the bustling crowd, Aaron looked around, seeming slightly overwhelmed. "Hey, want to sit with me and my friends at lunch?" Evan offered, not wanting to leave Aaron to fend for himself. Aaron's face lit up. "Yeah, that'd be great, thanks." They parted ways for their next classes, but Evan's mind stayed firmly rooted on the encounter. As he walked down the hallway, He thought about how he'd often wondered if he was adopted or if there was some piece of his past his parents had never shared. His mother, a single parent, had never spoken much about his father, only telling him once that it had been a painful time she'd rather not revisit. At lunch, Even and Aaron reunited in the cafeteria. Even's friends greeted Aaron warmly, though they couldn't hide their astonishment at the uncanny resemblance. His friend Sam, who had a knack for reading people, leaned forward, scrutinizing them both. "So, you two sure you're not related?" Sam asked, half joking, half serious. Even shrugged. "Not that I know of. My mom would have mentioned something." Aaron shook his head as well. "Same here. My parents never mentioned anything about long-lost siblings." Still, as they dug into their food and talked, the mystery of their similarity hung over the table like a thick fog. The conversation eventually drifted to lighter topics, and Even was pleasantly surprised to find how easily he and Aaron connected. They had similar tastes in music, shared a love for soccer, and even had identical favorite childhood movies. It felt as if he'd known Aaron his whole life. As lunch wound down, Aaron hesitated, then asked, "Hey, would you want to hang out after school? Maybe at that bookstore you mentioned?" Even nodded, excitement sparking in his eyes. "Yeah, that'd be awesome. It's my mom's store, so I'm there a lot. You'll love it." When the final bell rang that afternoon, Even met Aaron at the entrance, and they walked to his mom's bookstore, chatting about everything from the strange first date to their favorite books. When they entered, his mother, Rachel, looked up from behind the counter and froze. Her eyes flicked back and forth between Even and Aaron, widening with an expression Even couldn't place. "Mom, this is Aaron," Even said, but she didn't respond immediately. Her face had gone pale, and she seemed to struggle for words. After a beat, she forced a smile, though her hands were shaking slightly. "It's nice to meet you, Aaron," she said, her voice strained. Aaron nodded politely. "Nice to meet you too, Mrs. Caldwell." Rachel cleared her throat, trying to regain her composure. "Well, feel free to look around, boys. I'll be in the back if you need anything." As she hurried off, Even and Aaron exchanged puzzled glances. Even couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. His mother was usually calm and welcoming, but she'd seemed almost afraid. "Is she okay?" Aaron asked, frowning slightly. Even shrugged, feeling a knot form in his stomach. "I'm not sure. She's not usually like that." They spent the next hour browsing the shelves, but Even found himself glancing toward the back room, where his mother had disappeared. As Aaron leafed through a history book, Even wandered to the door, intending to check on her. But as he reached for the handle, he overheard her on the phone, her voice low and urgent. "I'm telling you, Michael, he looks exactly like Even." "No, I don't think it's a coincidence," she whispered, her voice trembling. "We can't keep this from him any longer. It's time." Even's heart hammered in his chest as he stepped back, struggling to process her words. His hand shook as he glanced back at Aaron, who looked up with a smile, oblivious to the bombshell that had just shattered Even's world. And in that moment, he knew this was only the beginning. The hidden truth. Even felt numb, his mind racing as he tried to process what he'd just overheard. His mother's words echoed in his head like a heartbeat. "He looks exactly like Even. We can't keep this from him any longer. It's time." For the rest of the hour, Even and Aaron pretended to browse through books, but Even's mind was elsewhere. He kept glancing at the back room, hoping his mother would reappear and give him some sort of explanation. But Rachel remained hidden, leaving Evan to wrestle with questions he never imagined he'd have to ask. Finally, Aaron looked at his watch and broke the silence. "I should probably head home," he said, sounding reluctant. "This place is amazing, though. Thanks for showing me around." Even forced a smile. "Yeah, no problem. Let's do this again sometime." As they walked outside, Even's heart was pounding. He wanted to say something, to ask Aaron if he'd noticed his mother's strange reaction, but he couldn't bring himself to do it. They parted ways on the sidewalk, and even watched Aaron disappear down the street, feeling more lost than ever. When he returned to the store, his mother was waiting for him, standing behind the counter with a grave expression. She looked as if she had aged 10 years in the past hour, her face pale and drawn. "Even," she said softly, "we need to talk." He swallowed hard, nodding. She led him to a small seating area in the back of the store, away from the prying ears of customers. They sat down, and Rachel took a deep breath, folding her hands in her lap. "Mom," Even said, his voice shaking, "what's going on? Why did you act so weird when you saw Aaron? And what did you mean on the phone about keeping something from me?" Rachel's eyes filled with tears, and she reached for his hand, holding it tightly. "Even," she began, her voice breaking, "there's something I should have told you a long time ago. I wanted to protect you, but now it seems that everything is coming to light, whether I like it or not." Even felt a chill run down his spine. He'd always known there were things his mother didn't talk about, especially when it came to his father. But he'd never imagined that those secrets might affect him so deeply. "What are you talking about?" he asked, barely able to breathe. Rachel wiped her eyes and looked at him, her gaze filled with a mixture of love and sorrow. "Even, you have a twin brother. His name is Aaron." The words hit him like a tidal wave, and for a moment, he couldn't comprehend them. A twin brother, Aaron. His mind reeled, struggling to make sense of it all. But how? Why didn't you ever tell me?" he stammered, his voice raw with confusion and hurt. Rachel took a shaky breath. "When you and Aaron were born, your father and I, we were going through a very difficult time. We were young, and we weren't prepared for the challenges that came with having two newborns. We thought it would be best to split you up." Evan stared at her in shock, unable to believe what he was hearing. "You split us up? Like we were possessions to be divided?" Rachel's face crumpled, and she clutched his hand tightly. "I know it sounds horrible, Even. It was the hardest decision I've ever made in my life. But at the time, we thought it was the only way to give each of you the best chance at a happy life. But why didn't you ever tell me?" he asked, his voice breaking. "All these years, I thought I was an only child. I thought I was alone." Tears streamed down her face, and she shook her head, her shoulders shaking with silent sobs. "I thought it would be easier for you, Even. I didn't want you to grow up with questions about why your brother wasn't with us. I thought it would be better if you didn't know." Even's mind was spinning, his emotions a tangled mess of anger, sadness, and betrayal. He felt as if his entire life had been a lie, a carefully constructed illusion that had shattered in an instant. "So, where is Dad?" he asked bitterly. "Does he live with Aaron?" Rachel nodded slowly. "Yes. He and Aaron's mother, your stepmother, raised Aaron. Your father and I, we went our separate ways after the divorce. I thought it would be best if you and I stayed here, while Aaron went with him." Even clenched his fists, feeling the surge of anger toward his father, a man he'd never known, who had taken his brother away and left him behind. He didn't know who to be angrier with, his mother for keeping the truth from him or his father for tearing their family apart. "Even," Rachel whispered, her voice choked with emotion. "I'm so sorry. I know I've hurt you, and I can never undo that. But please believe me. I did it because I thought it was best for you." He looked away, unable to meet her gaze. He felt as if he were drowning, pulled under by a flood of emotions he didn't know how to process. Part of him wanted to run away, to escape from the painful reality of what he'd just learned. But another part of him, a deeper, quieter part, knew that running wouldn't solve anything. After a long silence, he finally looked back at his mother. "I need to talk to Aaron," he said, his voice steady. "I need to tell him the truth." Rachel nodded, her eyes filled with sadness and resignation. "I understand. If you need to talk to him, I won't stop you. But please, even, just know that I love you, and I never wanted to hurt you." He stood up, feeling the weight of his mother's gaze on him as he walked out of the store. His mind was a whirlwind of thoughts and emotions, but one thing was clear. He needed to find Aaron, to tell him everything, and to piece together the fragments of the life he'd lost. As he walked down the street, he pulled out his phone and texted Aaron. "Hey, can we meet up? There's something really important I need to tell you." The reply came almost instantly. "Of course. Where do you want to meet?" They agreed to meet at a small park near the school, a quiet place where they could talk without interruption. Even arrived first, pacing back and forth as he tried to figure out how to begin. His stomach was in knots, his hands trembling as he waited. A few minutes later, he saw Aaron approaching, looking slightly concerned. "Hey," Aaron said, walking up to him. "What's going on? You sounded serious." Even took a deep breath, gathering his thoughts. "There's something you need to know. Something that my mom just told me." Aaron's eyes widened, and he listened intently as Evan recounted the story, his words tumbling out in a rush as he explained everything his mother had told him. The separation, the hidden family secrets, and the truth that had been buried for so long. When he finished, Aaron was silent, his face pale, and his eyes wide with shock. He looked down, processing the weight of Evan's words, then looked up with a mixture of confusion and sadness. "So, we're brothers?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Evan nodded, his own heart breaking as he saw the hurt in Aaron's eyes. "Yeah, we're brothers." Aaron's face crumpled, and he looked away, struggling to hold back tears. "I always felt like something was missing," he whispered. "Like there was this empty space in my life that I couldn't explain. And now I know why." They stood there in silence, two brothers who had lived separate lives, brought together by a twist of fate. Evan reached out, placing a hand on Aaron's shoulder, and for the first time, he felt the bond between them, a bond that had been broken, but one that could never truly be severed. As the sun began to set, casting a golden glow over the park, Evan knew that their journey was far from over. They had a lifetime of questions to ask, a lifetime of memories to share, and a lifetime of pain to heal. But in that moment, as they stood together, he felt a glimmer of hope, a hope that somehow they would find a way to rebuild the family they had lost. Unveiling the past, Evan and Aaron sat in the park until the sky turned deep shades of purple and blue, a silence hanging between them that was heavy with shared confusion and grief. The revelation of their bond, of a life they might have lived together, felt overwhelming yet strangely comforting. They had each found something they'd been searching for, even if they hadn't realized it. After a while, Aaron looked over at Evan, his expression a mixture of sorrow and determination. "I can't just leave it like this. I need answers. I need to know why they kept this from us, why they thought they had the right to split us up like this." Evan nodded. He felt the same knot of hurt and anger tightening in his chest, and he wanted answers just as badly. "Yeah, I want to know the truth too. My mom explained some things, but I feel like there's a lot she left out." Aaron's gaze grew hard. "Then we need to go to my dad. He's probably the only one who can tell us what really happened." Evan hesitated, his mind flashing to his mother's pained face and trembling voice. Part of him wanted to protect her, to give her the benefit of the doubt, but the other part knew that without the full story, he'd never be able to let go of the anger and betrayal he felt. "Yeah," he said finally, meeting Aaron's determined gaze. "Let's go talk to him." The next morning, Evan and Aaron made plans to meet outside Aaron's house. Evan had never seen the place before, but as he approached, he felt a strange sensation, a mixture of excitement and dread. The house was on the other side of town, in a quiet, tree-lined neighborhood that felt worlds away from the life he'd known. It was a place he might have called home under different circumstances. Aaron greeted him at the door with a tense smile, and together they stepped inside. Aaron's father, Michael Parker, was in the living room, reading the newspaper. When he saw them, his face registered confusion, and then a flicker of recognition. He looked between Evan and Aaron, his eyes widening as he seemed to realize who was standing before him. "Evan," he said, his voice choked. It's you." Evan felt a surge of anger rise within him. This man, his own father, had never even tried to reach out to him, to know him. And now he was acting as if this reunion was a gift he had been waiting for. "Yes, it's me," Evan replied, his tone sharp, "and I think we deserve some explanations." Michael sighed, setting his newspaper aside. "I suppose you do," he said, gesturing for them to sit down. The boys sat on the couch across from him, their postures rigid with anticipation. "I want you to know," Michael began, his voice low and strained, "that there's not a day that goes by when I don't think about the choice your mother and I made. We thought we were doing what was best, but it's haunted me every day since." He even exchanged a glance with Aaron, both of them silent but clearly skeptical. Michael took a deep breath and continued, his hands shaking slightly as he spoke. "Your mother and I, we were young, as she probably told you. We were barely out of college when she got pregnant, and we hadn't planned on having children so soon. When you two were born, we were overjoyed, but we were also overwhelmed. We had no idea how we were going to manage two infants, especially with the financial struggles we were facing." He paused, his gaze distant as he relived memories that seemed to weigh heavily on him. "We were in debt, struggling to make ends meet, and we started fighting. Every little thing became a source of tension. Eventually, it felt like the only thing holding us together was the two of you, but even that couldn't keep us from falling apart. So, you thought the solution was to just divide us?" Evan asked, his voice bitter, like we were some kind of burden. Michael winced, the pain in his eyes evident. "I know it sounds terrible, and maybe it was, but at the time, we believed we were doing what was best for you. We thought that if we each took one of you, we could give you a stable home, a better life. Your mother had support here, with her parents and her family. And I had a new job opportunity across the country. We thought it was a chance for each of you to have a better future, even if it meant growing up apart." Aaron shook his head, his face a mask of anger and disbelief. "But you never even tried to stay in touch with each other, to let us know that we had a twin out there somewhere." Michael's shoulders slumped, and he looked down, ashamed. "We tried, at first. We sent letters back and forth, trying to keep each other updated on your lives. But as the years passed, it became harder. Rachel remarried, and I did too. We both felt that we were moving on, that it was less painful to just let go." "Less painful for you," Evan said, his voice filled with bitterness. "Did you ever think about how we would feel? Growing up alone, never knowing that we had a brother." Michael's face twisted with regret, and he rubbed his temples, looking as though he were struggling to hold himself together. "I know I failed you both," he said softly. "I know I can never make up for the choices I made. But please believe me, even Aaron. I loved you both. I still do. I just didn't know how to handle it. And I thought that by giving you each a stable home, I was doing something right." The boys sat in silence, processing his words. Evan felt a strange mix of emotions: anger, sadness, and a deep, aching sorrow for the family he had never known. But there was also a small part of him that understood the desperation his parents must have felt. He had seen his mother struggle over the years, working long hours to keep the bookstore afloat, sacrificing so much for him. Maybe in their own flawed way, they really had tried to do what they thought was best. After a long pause, Aaron spoke, his voice subdued. "So, what now? What are we supposed to do with all of this?" Michael looked at him, his eyes filled with a pleading expression. "I don't expect you to forgive me, And I don't expect you to just forget everything you've been through. But I'd like to be a part of your lives, if you'll let me. I'd like to try to make up for lost time, too, to rebuild what we lost." Even looked at Aaron, searching his brother's face for some sign of what he was feeling. Aaron's expression was unreadable, a mixture of pain and contemplation. Finally, he nodded slowly. "I don't know if I'm ready to forgive you," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "But I'm willing to try. I want to get to know Even, and maybe you too." Even felt a surge of relief at Aaron's words, and he nodded in agreement. "Yeah, I think we should try, but it's going to take time." Michael looked at them both, his face a mixture of relief and regret. "I understand. I'll give you all the time you need." As they stood to leave, Michael reached out, resting a hand on Even's shoulder. "Thank you," he said quietly, his voice filled with gratitude, "for giving me a chance to be a part of your lives again." Even nodded, though he couldn't bring himself to say anything. The wounds were still too fresh, the pain too raw. But he knew that, in time, he might be able to forgive. And perhaps, just perhaps, they could build something new together. Outside, Aaron turned to Even, his face weary but hopeful. "I guess this is just the beginning, huh?" Even smiled, though his heart was heavy. "Yeah, but at least we're in it together." They walked home in silence, each lost in their thoughts. Despite the pain, there was a strange comfort in knowing they were no longer alone, that they had each other to lean on. And as they moved forward, piece by piece, they would uncover the rest of their story. A story that had been hidden for too long, but that at last they were ready to face together. Digging deeper. The next few days were a whirlwind of emotions for Even and Aaron. They had both agreed to try reconnecting with their parents, but the path was far from easy. For Even, facing his mother after discovering the truth about his twin brother was still painful. He hadn't been able to let go of the feeling that she had betrayed him, even though part of him understood her intentions. One afternoon, Aaron invited Even to his house, suggesting they sift through some old family photographs his father kept in the attic. Aaron thought that maybe, somewhere among those memories, they would find some answers, or at least something that could help them understand how they had ended up in this tangled mess. When Even arrived at Aaron's house, the two brothers shared an awkward smile, each carrying a palpable mix of excitement and tension. They climbed up to the attic, where Michael had already cleared out space and laid out old photo albums, boxes of letters, and dusty trinkets from a past life. Aaron opened one of the boxes and pulled out a stack of photographs, the corners curled and edges worn. "Look at this," he said, handing a photo to Even. It was an image of their parents, Michael and Rachel, looking younger and more carefree than Evan had ever seen them. They were standing side by side, each holding a baby swaddled in a soft blanket. One was unmistakably Even, and the other Aaron. Seeing the two of them together, Even felt an unexpected pang of sadness. This was a life they could have shared, a life that had been taken from them. He couldn't help but wonder what it would have been like to grow up with Aaron by his side, to have a partner in crime, a confidant, a twin. "Look at how happy they were," Aaron murmured, his eyes glued to the photograph. "It's hard to believe that things fell apart so quickly." Even nodded, flipping through more pictures. Some showed his mother with him as a baby, others showed Michael and Aaron in their home in Seattle. Each image seemed to tell a story of a family divided, of a bond that had been severed too soon. And yet, despite the sadness, there was a certain comfort in knowing that they had, at one time, been whole. As they continued to look through the photos, Even stumbled upon a small notebook, its cover faded and edges frayed. Curiosity piqued. He opened it to the first page, his heart skipping a beat when he realized it was a journal, written by his mother during the early years of his life. "Look at this," he whispered, showing it to Aaron. "It's my mom's journal. She wrote about everything." They huddled together, flipping through the pages. The entries began shortly after they were born, documenting their mother's struggle to adjust to motherhood, her dreams for their future, and her fears about raising two boys with a strained marriage. As they read, the pain and doubt she had experienced became increasingly clear. Her words were filled with love, but also with a profound sense of inadequacy, a feeling that she wasn't enough to hold their family together. Eva and Aaron sat in the dimly lit attic, flipping through the fragile pages of their mother's journal. The entries painted a picture that was raw and honest, filled with a young mother's conflicting emotions, love, fear, and the heavy weight of uncertainty. Eva read aloud from one of the entries, his voice barely above a whisper. June 18. Today was one of those days that felt like it could last forever, yet ended in the blink of an eye. Michael and I took the boys to the park, just the four of us, and for a moment, I felt like maybe we could make this work. Maybe we could be the family I always dreamed of. But when we got home, the arguments started again, and I'm left wondering, are we strong enough to hold on? Eva paused, swallowing hard. He hadn't realized how deeply his mother had struggled, nor how much she had wanted things to work. It wasn't just about their separation. It was about her dreams being shattered, and the helplessness she must have felt when she couldn't prevent it. Aaron leaned in, his eyes skimming the page. It sounds like she really tried, he said quietly, a hint of empathy in his voice. She wanted to keep us together, but she felt like she was losing control. They continued reading in silence, flipping through entries that chronicled Rachel's sleepless nights, Michael's long work hours, and their arguments, which seemed to escalate with each passing month. One entry, in particular, caught their attention. October 3. Today, Michael brought up the idea of splitting the boys. I couldn't believe it. The thought of letting one of them go breaks my heart, but Michael seems convinced it's the only way. He says we'd be doing it for them, giving them stability, giving them a life we can't provide together. But how do I choose? How can a mother choose between her children? Aaron sucked in a breath, his face twisted in pain. I had no idea. I never thought it could have been this hard for her. I always pictured her as this person who just didn't want me. But reading this, it's different. Eva reached over, giving his brother's shoulder a reassuring squeeze. I thought the same thing, he admitted. I thought she was keeping secrets because she didn't want me to know about you. But maybe she was just trying to protect us, even if it was in the wrong way. They continued reading through the final entries, which became shorter and more fragmented. The last entry was dated the week they had separated. November 15. Tomorrow, I say goodbye to Aaron. I don't know how I'm going to do it. He looks at me with those wide, trusting eyes, and all I can think is that I'm breaking a promise I never even made. I don't know if I'll ever forgive myself. I can only hope that one day he'll understand, that they both will. The page was smudged, as if a tear had blurred the ink. Eva stared at it, his heart aching. He had always seen his mother as a figure of strength, someone who never wavered in her decisions. But reading her words now, he realized that she had been just as scared, just as vulnerable as any young parent would be. I guess she did what she thought was right. Aaron murmured, his voice thick with emotion. But still, it hurts. I can't shake the feeling that I missed out on so much. Eva nodded, closing the journal gently. Me too, but we're here now, right? We found each other, and maybe that's what matters. They sat in silence for a while, each lost in thought. The journal had given them a glimpse into their mother's heart, and while it didn't erase the pain of their separation, it softened the edges, helping them understand the difficult choices their parents had faced. After a while, Aaron broke the silence. Do you think we'll ever be able to? I don't know. Forgive them. Eva thought about it, his gaze distant. I think it'll take time. But at least now, we know they didn't just abandon us. They made mistakes, but they did it out of love, in their own messed up way. Aaron nodded, a faint smile tugging at his lips. Yeah, I guess you're right. They decided to take the journal with them, agreeing that Even would return it to his mother after they'd had a chance to process everything. Together, they left the attic, feeling as if they had just unlocked a piece of their past that had been hidden away for far too long. The next day, Even asked his mother to meet him at a local cafe. He wanted to show her that he had found the journal, that he understood more about her struggles, and to see if they could find some path toward healing. When Rachel arrived, she looked nervous, her hands twisting together as she took a seat across from him. She glanced at the journal on the table, her eyes widening in recognition. "Mom, I found this at Aaron's house," Even said gently. "I read what you wrote, about everything. I know now how hard it must have been for you." Rachel's face softened and her eyes filled with tears. "Oh, Even, I was so afraid of this moment. I didn't want you to know just how broken I was back then. I wanted you to see me as someone strong, someone who always had it together." Even reached across the table, taking her hand. "I know you were just trying to protect me. And maybe you made the best decision you could at the time. But I need you to know that keeping Aaron a secret, it hurt. It made me feel like there was this part of me that was missing." She nodded, wiping a tear from her cheek. "I'm so sorry, Even. I can't undo the choices I made, but I promise you, I'll do everything I can to make it right. I want to be there for you, and for Aaron, if you'll both let me." Even managed a small smile, feeling the tension between them begin to ease. "We want that too. Aaron wants to know you, Mom. He wants to be a part of our lives." They sat together in silence for a moment, the weight of their shared grief giving way to a quiet understanding. There was no quick fix for the years of pain and separation, but they had taken the first step toward healing. And that was enough for now. Later that evening, Even and Aaron met up at a nearby park. They walked along the winding trails, the fading light casting long shadows around them. "So," Aaron began, glancing at Even, "how did it go with your mom?" Even smiled, a sense of peace settling over him. "It went well. She understands. She wants to be part of both of our lives, if you're okay with that." Aaron nodded thoughtfully. "I think I am. After reading the journal, I think I understand her a little more. I'm still hurt, but I want to give her a chance." They stopped at a bench overlooking a small pond, the surface reflecting the colors of the sunset. Even turned to his brother, a feeling of gratitude swelling in his chest. "I'm glad we found each other, Aaron. Even if it took us this long, I'm glad we have this chance." Aaron smiled, clapping a hand on Even's shoulder. "Me too. It's like all those years we were apart, something was missing. And now I feel like I'm finally whole." They sat together in comfortable silence, watching the sunset as they began to dream about a future that, for the first time, included each other. Their journey was far from over, but together they were ready to face whatever came next. For the first time, they felt truly complete. Uncovering the legacy. Even and Aaron had managed to take steps toward reconciliation with their parents, but they couldn't shake the feeling that there were still unanswered questions lingering in the shadows. While they now understood the reasons behind their separation, something felt incomplete, like a book with the final chapter missing. One evening, they gathered at Even's house, determined to go through the last of Rachel's keepsakes in hopes of uncovering more pieces of their story. Rachel watched from the doorway, her face marked with a blend of worry and curiosity. She was beginning to accept the bond forming between her sons, but she hadn't yet prepared herself for the emotions that came with confronting her past. "Mom," Even said as he reached for an old wooden box stored in the back of a closet, "is there anything else you haven't told us? We're looking for anything. Photos, letters, anything that could help us understand." Rachel hesitated, her gaze dropping to the floor. "There is one last thing," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "Something I kept all these years, something I thought you'd never need to see." She disappeared for a moment, returning with a small ornate box covered in dust. With a slight tremble in her hands, she handed it to Even and Aaron. Inside are letters from your father, and one letter he left me the night we decided to separate you both. I couldn't bear to read it back then, but maybe now it will finally bring some closure." Even and Aaron exchanged a glance, feeling a mixture of anticipation and dread as they opened the box. The faint scent of aged paper wafted up as they lifted the top, revealing the bundle of letters tied with a faded ribbon. On top was an envelope addressed to Rachel and the boys. Aaron picked up the letter, his fingers brushing against the fragile paper, and began to read aloud. ***, Rachel, Even, and Aaron. If you're reading this, it means that, somehow, you found each other. I want you to know that I never stopped loving any of you. I was young, afraid, and too stubborn to admit that I was struggling. I thought by separating you both, I was giving you each a chance at happiness, but I realize now that I was only running from my own failures. To Even and Aaron, I wanted to be the father you deserved. I wanted to watch you grow up side by side, sharing each milestone, each challenge. But life had other plans, and I made mistakes I can never take back. I hope that someday you can forgive me, and maybe find it in your hearts to forgive each other. Rachel, I know you'll give the boys the love and strength they need to grow up whole, even if it's without me. I hope you'll forgive me too. Yours, always, Michael. ***. The words hung in the air like a fragile peace offering from a man they barely knew. Rachel's eyes glistened with tears, and Aaron's hand tightened around the letter as he processed the heartfelt confession. Even looked over at his mother, a question forming in his mind. Mom, to Dad, did he ever try to come back? Rachel sighed, her gaze distant. He did, a few years after we split. He sent a letter saying he wanted to reunite the family. But by then, I was already remarried, and you were settled here. I didn't want to disrupt your life. I thought keeping the past buried would make things easier for you. I see now how wrong I was. The three of them sat in silence for a moment, absorbing the weight of Michael's words. Aaron traced his fingers along the edge of the box, deep in thought. It sounds like he really regretted everything. I wish he'd had the courage to tell us in person, instead of leaving it all in a letter. Even nodded, understanding his brother's frustration. But maybe this letter, maybe it's his way of reaching out. Maybe it's the closest he could get to admitting his mistakes. They continued sifting through the box, reading fragments of letters that revealed glimpses of Michael's struggles, his dreams, his regrets, and his longing for the family he'd lost. The more they read, the more they began to see him not as the distant, unfeeling figure they had imagined, but as a flawed man trying to make amends with a decision that had haunted him. After they finished, Rachel left them alone in the living room, giving them space to process everything they'd learned. Aaron leaned back on the couch, exhaling deeply. I never imagined our lives were this complicated, he said with a weary smile. Even chuckled softly, feeling a sense of relief. Yeah, I always thought it was just me and Mom against the world. But now it feels like I've stepped into this whole other world that was hidden from me. They sat in silence, watching as the evening shadows lengthened, feeling a renewed sense of connection with each other and their shared past. But one question still lingered in Evan's mind, a question he hadn't dared ask his mother. Aaron, have you ever wondered why they didn't just tell us about each other sooner? He asked hesitantly. Aaron's expression grew thoughtful, a hint of sadness in his eyes. I have. And I guess, maybe they thought that by keeping us apart, they were protecting us from their mistakes. Even nodded, understanding but still struggling to fully accept it. But we're here now, he said, looking over at his brother. And I think, maybe it's time we stop letting their decisions define us. We're our own people. We have a chance to create our own story. Aaron grinned, his eyes lighting up with a spark of determination. Yeah, you're right. We've got each other now. Maybe that's all we really need. In the days that followed, Even and Aaron started spending more time together, bonding over shared interests and discovering new things about each other. They went hiking in the nearby mountains, played endless games of soccer in the park, and even helped out at Evan's mother's bookstore, where they often found themselves lost in conversation about life, dreams, and everything in between. For the first time in years, Evan felt a sense of completeness he hadn't realized he was missing. Aaron was not just a brother. He was a friend, a confidant, someone who understood him in ways no one else could. They shared an unspoken language, a silent connection that had been there all along, waiting to be discovered. One afternoon, as they were stacking books in the store, Aaron looked over at Evan, a mischievous glint in his eye. "You know, we should do something to celebrate. Something symbolic, to mark this new beginning." Evan raised an eyebrow, intrigued. "Like what?" Aaron shrugged, grinning. "I don't know. Something memorable. Maybe we could take a road trip, just you and me, exploring new places, making memories." Evan's face lit up at the idea. "That sounds amazing. We could visit the places our parents talked about in those letters, kind of like retracing their steps." They spent the next few weeks planning their trip, mapping out routes, and saving up money from part-time jobs. It became their shared dream, a journey to not only discover the world, but also to uncover more about each other and their family. When they finally set off, with backpacks stuffed with essentials and a sense of adventure buzzing in their veins, they felt ready to leave behind the weight of the past. They traveled along winding country roads, stayed in small inns, and stopped at every roadside attraction that caught their eye. They laughed until they couldn't breathe, talked about their hopes and fears, and in the quiet moments, they reflected on the family they had lost and the family they were building together. In one small town, they stumbled upon a bookstore that reminded them of Rachel's shop. Inside, they found a collection of old journals, and without even thinking, they each bought one, vowing to fill the pages with stories of their travels, their discoveries, and their memories. Sitting in a cafe that evening, Evan opened his journal to the first page, pen in hand. He looked over at Aaron, who nodded encouragingly, and began to write. "To the brother I never knew, to the past that shaped us, and to the future we're creating together." Aaron grinned, scribbling a similar message in his own journal. They shared a smile, feeling a deep sense of peace and contentment. They had faced their family's secrets, accepted the flaws of their parents, and found strength in each other. And as they set off down the road toward their next destination, they knew that, no matter what lay ahead, they would face it together. Because in the end, they had found what they'd been searching for all along: family, forgiveness, and the promise of a new beginning, a legacy reclaimed. The road trip that Evan and Aaron had dreamed of became a transformative journey, each mile bringing them closer to new discoveries, both about their family and themselves. As they traveled from town to town, following clues from their parents' old letters, they found themselves uncovering stories that had once seemed lost in time. One evening, after a long day of driving, they arrived in a small coastal town where their parents had once vacationed. The sun was beginning to set, casting a golden glow over the ocean. They parked the car near a rocky overlook and sat on the hood, watching the waves crash against the shore. Evan pulled out his journal, flipping through the pages he'd filled with thoughts and memories from their journey so far. "You know," he began, looking over at Aaron, "when we started this trip, I thought it would be about understanding our parents' choices. But I think it's become more about understanding ourselves." Aaron nodded thoughtfully, his gaze fixed on the horizon. "Yeah, I used to think that knowing where we came from would somehow make everything make sense. But I think I'd finally get it now. Our parents were just people, like us. People who made mistakes and did the best they could." They fell into a comfortable silence, both lost in thought. The ocean breeze ruffled their hair, carrying with it the scent of salt and freedom. Evan felt an overwhelming sense of peace, a feeling he hadn't known he was searching for until he found it. After a while, Aaron broke the silence. Do you ever think about what life would have been like if we'd grown up together? If none of this had happened? Even considered the question, a small smile tugging at the corners of his mouth. Sometimes. But honestly, I think maybe this is how it was supposed to be. Maybe we had to go through all of this to find each other. Aaron nodded, looking relieved. I think you're right. And I think we found what we came here for. That night, they checked into a small bed and breakfast near the beach, a cozy place with creaky wooden floors and rooms filled with mismatched furniture. The walls were lined with faded photographs of ships and fishermen, relics of a past that seemed to echo their own search for roots. After dinner, they wandered down to the beach with a blanket, spreading it out on the sand, and lying back to watch the stars. The night sky was clear, the stars bright and countless, stretching out like an endless tapestry above them. Do you remember that story Mom used to tell us about the stars? Even asked, smiling as he remembered the bedtime stories his mother had once woven into his childhood. Aaron nodded. Yeah, she used to say that each star was a wish someone made, and that if you found a shooting star, it was a sign that someone's wish had come true. They lay there in silence, watching the sky in hopes of catching a glimpse of a shooting star. It felt almost like a ritual, a way to honor the dreams they'd held onto, the wishes they'd made as children without ever knowing the other existed. After a while, Aaron turned to Even, his voice low but filled with purpose. We've spent so much time uncovering their story, but now, I think it's time we start our own. Even grinned, feeling a surge of excitement. Agreed. I don't want our lives to be defined by the past anymore. We have the chance to create something new, something all our own. The words seemed to hang in the air, a quiet vow between brothers who had found each other against all odds. They stayed out on the beach until the early hours of the morning, talking about their dreams, their hopes, and the futures they wanted to build. For the first time, they weren't looking back. They were looking forward together. In the weeks that followed, their journey took on a new purpose. They began visiting small bookstores and libraries in each town they passed, connecting with the people who, like Rachel, had devoted their lives to preserving stories. Each stop became a chance to immerse themselves in new worlds, to see how different lives were lived, and to understand the power of storytelling. Inspired by the journey, they decided to start documenting the stories of the people they met. From elderly librarians who'd seen generations pass through their doors, to young writers who dreamed of seeing their names on the spines of novels. Each story became a chapter in their journals, a testament to the power of connection and the beauty of human resilience. One afternoon, in a small town nestled between mountains, they visited a quaint bookstore owned by a woman in her 70s named Margaret. She greeted them with a warm smile and showed them around, her eyes lighting up as she shared stories of her life and the history of the store. You know, she said, her voice gentle yet wise, stories are the only thing that last. People come and go, places change, but stories, they're eternal. They keep us connected to those we've lost and to those who will come after us. Even felt a shiver run down his spine, her words striking a chord within him. He glanced over at Aaron, who nodded, clearly feeling the same way. After they left, they sat on a bench outside the store, their journals open in their laps. Even looked over at his brother, his heart full. I think we found our legacy, Aaron. Not just theirs, but ours. We're here to carry on these stories, to make sure they're never forgotten. Aaron smiled, his eyes shining with a sense of purpose. Yeah, I think you're right. And maybe, one day, our story will be part of that legacy too. When they finally returned home, they brought with them a newfound understanding of their family, and most importantly, of themselves. They had found peace with the past, and they were ready to move forward, creating lives that reflected the lessons they'd learned on their journey. Even returned to work at his mother's bookstore, throwing himself into his work with renewed passion. He helped Rachel organize events, welcoming local authors and storytellers, and began to share some of the stories he and Aaron had collected. People were drawn to the tales of resilience and connection, finding inspiration in the words of ordinary people who had lived extraordinary lives. Aaron, meanwhile, took up writing, channeling his experiences into stories of his own. His work resonated with a quiet wisdom, capturing the beauty of human connection and the healing power of forgiveness. He became a frequent presence in Evan's bookstore, often holding readings that drew crowds from all over the town. Together, they became known as the Caldwell brothers, two men who had found each other against all odds, who had faced the pain of their past and transformed it into something beautiful. Their bond became a testament to the power of family, not defined by blood alone, but by the choice to stand together, to support one another, and to move forward as one. And as they stood side by side at each event, watching the faces of those who had come to hear their stories, they knew that their journey had only just begun. They had reclaimed their legacy, and now they were ready to pass it on. A new chapter begins. Months had passed since Evan and Aaron returned from their journey. They'd both settled back into their lives, yet everything felt transformed. The town had taken an interest in their story, and people often stopped by the bookstore to ask about their road trip, the family discoveries, and the people they had met along the way. Evan and Aaron's lives had become woven into the fabric of the community, and the brothers found themselves increasingly seen not just as a curiosity, but as beloved members of the town's story. It was a chilly morning in early autumn when a letter arrived at Evan's bookstore, addressed to the Caldwell brothers. Rachel had seen the letter sitting in the mail pile and passed it to Evan with a curious look, a spark of excitement in her eyes. Evan called Aaron to meet him at the bookstore, unable to wait to open the letter together. When Aaron arrived, they sat down on the worn leather couch in the back of the shop, the letter between them. Evan carefully broke the seal, pulling out a piece of thick, cream-colored paper. The letter was neatly handwritten in flowing script. As he began to read aloud, both brothers listened in rapt attention. Asterisk, asterisk, dear Evan and Aaron. My name is Judith Emerson, and I am the director of the National Writers Guild. Recently, I came across a collection of short stories written by Aaron, and upon learning about your personal journey, I felt compelled to reach out. Your story is an inspiration, a testament to the power of family and resilience. The Guild hosts an annual Storytellers Symposium, a gathering for writers, historians, and storytellers from across the country. This year, we would be honored to have you both join us as guest speakers to share your journey. Your experience has already touched so many, and we believe it will inspire countless others. Please consider this an invitation to share your story on a national stage, where it will live on for generations to come. Warmest regards, Judith Emerson asterisk asterisk. Aaron looked at Evan, eyes wide with disbelief. They want us to speak, in front of actual writers and storytellers. Evan laughed, equally stunned. I guess they think our story's worth sharing. He glanced at Aaron, a grin spreading across his face. So, what do you think? Are you up for it? Aaron hesitated, looking down at his hands. I mean, I've never spoken in front of a big crowd before. Writing stories is one thing, but talking about my life in front of strangers, that's different. Evan reached over, placing a reassuring hand on his shoulder. We'll be doing it together. And think of it this way. This is our chance to tell our story, to give it the ending we want. Aaron looked up, a flicker of excitement in his eyes. You're right. Maybe this is the next step, a way to move forward, to share what we learned, and maybe help others find their own stories. 2 months later, they found themselves on a plane to New York City, bound for the National Writers Guild Storytellers Symposium. The event was held in a historic theater in the heart of the city, a place steeped in the very stories and history they had grown to love. As they walked through the grand lobby, filled with writers and artists, the brothers felt both intimidated and exhilarated. Their session was scheduled for the following day, so they spent the evening attending talks, meeting other storytellers, and exploring the city. Despite their nerves, they quickly realized that they were surrounded by people who shared their passion for stories. Everywhere they turned, there were conversations about family histories, personal journeys, and the power of words to bring people together. On the morning of their talk, Evan and Aaron prepared their notes, nervous but determined. The theater buzzed with anticipation as they took the stage, standing together before an audience of hundreds. Evan stepped forward, clearing his throat. "Thank you all for being here. My name is Evan Caldwell, and this is my brother Aaron. We're honored to have the chance to share our story with you, not because it's unique, but because we believe that everyone has a story worth telling." He glanced at Aaron, who took a deep breath and continued. "For most of our lives, Evan and I didn't know each other existed. We grew up apart, in different towns, with no idea that we had a twin out there somewhere. But life has a funny way of bringing people together, and in our case, it happened in a high school classroom." The audience was captivated as they took turns recounting the journey that had brought them to this stage, the shock of meeting each other, the discovery of their parents' past, and the emotional journey to forgiveness and understanding. They spoke of the letters, the journal, and the people they had met along the way. With each word, they could feel the weight of their story lifting, transforming into something larger than themselves. Toward the end of their talk, Evan paused, looking out at the audience. "When Aaron and I first found out about each other, we thought we were trying to uncover our parents' legacy. But what we discovered was that we have the power to create our own. This journey has taught us that family isn't just about where you come from. It's about who you choose to stand by, who you fight for, and the stories you create together." As they finished, the audience erupted into applause, and the brothers shared a relieved, exhilarated look. They had done it. They had shared their story, not just for themselves, but for anyone who had ever felt lost, alone, or in search of something more. After their talk, they were approached by people from all walks of life, writers, teachers, parents, and young people who saw a part of themselves in Evan and Aaron's journey. Some spoke of siblings they had lost touch with. Others shared stories of fractured families and the pain of secrets. One young man, about their age, approached them with a hesitant smile. "Your story gave me the courage to reach out to my estranged brother," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "I've been scared to face him for years, but hearing you two made me realize that maybe there's a chance to fix things." Evan and Aaron exchanged a look, feeling the surge of pride. This was what they had hoped for, that their journey might help others heal in ways they hadn't thought possible. After returning home, life settled into a steady rhythm, but the impact of their journey and their talk lingered. The connections they'd made at the symposium opened up unexpected doors, with opportunities for Aaron to publish his stories and for Evan to expand the bookstore's reach in the community. One evening, Aaron came to the bookstore with an idea. "What if we start a monthly event here? A storytelling night where people can come to share their stories, just like we did at the symposium." Evan's face lit up at the thought. "That's perfect. We can create a space for people to feel heard, to connect, and to pass down their stories. We'll call it Legacy Night." And so, Legacy Night was born. Each month, people from all over town gathered in the cozy bookstore, filling the aisles and settling into chairs as they listened to stories of love, loss, triumph, and perseverance. The event became a cherished tradition, bringing together people from all walks of life, creating a new family united by the power of stories. Over time, Evan and Aaron watched as Legacy Night grew, attracting visitors from other towns and even inspiring similar events across the state. Their story had sparked something greater than themselves, a movement to preserve stories and celebrate the resilience of the human spirit. One evening, after a particularly moving Legacy Night, Rachel approached them, her eyes filled with pride. "I'm so proud of you both," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "You've turned our family story into something beautiful, something that will live on long after we're gone." Evan and Aaron looked at each other, smiling. They had come full circle, turning their pain into purpose, transforming the secrets of the past into a legacy of connection and healing. Together, they had reclaimed their family's story, creating a new one that was theirs alone. A story of resilience, love, and the power to choose their own path. As the evening wound down, they locked up the bookstore, the quiet night settling around them. They stood outside, looking up at the stars, each silently making a wish for the future, for each other, and for the countless stories they had yet to tell. In that moment, they knew they were exactly where they were meant to be, together, ready to face whatever came next, knowing that their story was just beginning.